Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock in Pasadena and 9 o'clock in Paramus, New Jersey. I'm Joe Abate. You're listening to Vintage Motocross Radio. In a moment, I'll be telling you more about my guest, Grant Langston, but right now I'd like to thank the sponsors who make this show possible. Vintco, keep the ride going with over 650 products in their catalog. Motion Pro, for all your tools, specialized cables, and controls. Golan Products, check out their fuel filters and learn more about becoming a distributor for Golan products. Full Circle Racing Limited for vintage and modern rims, spokes, lacing, and truing. Northwest Mako CZ. Thank you, Alan Brown. Preston Petty Products, the legend continues. Racer X Magazine, available online on your newsstand now. Sunrise Vapor Blasting of Modesto, California, and a special thanks to Kevin Bridges and the Dirt Diggers North Motorcycle Club. Don't forget, the Hangtown National is on September 11th this year, and it's going to be the last race of the season. You won't want to miss that. My guest this evening was born in Durban, South Africa, and competed on the Grand Prix circuit for 2 years. He won a world championship in 2000 in the 125 class. He then came to America, where he raced both Supercross and Motocross, and he amassed another 5 AMA championships. After retiring from racing, he became an expert commentator for NBC Sports and the Outdoor National Series. He was also the host of a show I really enjoy, the Whiskey Throttle Show. It's my pleasure to have as my guest this evening, Mr. Grant Langston. Grant, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Joe, how are you?
I'm doing really well. You know, Grant, I just learned today that I could have added 2021 Hall of Fame inductee to that list.
Well, I guess being nominated is one thing, getting in is a whole nother story. So we'll see. But it's cool to have been recognized, and obviously not something I ever thought of as a kid. You know, like, hey, it'd be cool to be in the AMA Hall of Fame. I didn't even know about that back then, but now that I get to look back and I see the names in there, I'm like, it would be cool.
Yeah, it is quite a list, and it's quite an accomplishment. So I just wanted to congratulate you on that, and I'm sure things will go as planned, Grant.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to wait until the end of my interview to talk more about this, but it was something that I read years ago, and it truly hit me in an emotional way. And it's something you said, and I quote, "There was a point in Europe when I did not qualify for a couple of GPs. It was cold. We were broke. It was raining. We didn't have any friends. I remember saying to my dad, I just want to go home. I think I'm done. And I'll never forget what he said. You don't have to go home. There is no home. I sold home to get you here, and we're going to stick this out." And you also said it was probably the best thing ever, because had you given up, it would have been the biggest mistake of your life. Grant, I want to know, where were you that day? And tell us more about that moment in your life.
Well, you know, backing up just a little bit, I was the hot shot out of South Africa. Obviously, we know South Africa is not known to be a huge hotbed of talent and prospects, but there have been riders that have made it the highest level that came out of there.
Sure.
But I was basically right before my 15th birthday. I won my first, what would be considered like South African pro class or top level. So at 14, I won at our highest level in a dominant fashion. And, you know, and then I dominated the last couple, I think 3 rounds after that to end out the season. So it was basically one of those things where if, you know, I had this sort of agreement with my dad. Basically what happened is I went from 80s and I skipped 125 junior at high school and went straight to like our version of the pro class. And I was getting taken out in the beginning. Everyone hated me. And so I had some okay results in the beginning. And then a mechanical kind of hurt my championship hopes, but I dominated the second half of the season. So I sort of had this pact with my dad, because I had a hair up my ass to chase the world scene. You know, Greg Albertine, I think you had mentioned before, was he an influence? Yeah, Greg was a huge influence in the sense that he, you know, made kids like myself feel like, hey, you can come out of South Africa and take on the world and be successful. So yeah, he was a huge influence. But by the time I was 15, there was nobody that could beat me in South Africa. So, you know, there was the European Championship, but there again, I think based on the fact that, we didn't have time to get our feet wet and do all that, it was like, we got to turn this into a professional career type thing. And I think that's kind of what my dad's thought was at that time. And we'd done a couple races overseas to at least know a little bit and go, okay, the kid's in the ballpark type thing. But,
Right.
Moved to Europe and all of a sudden it's just like everything's a lot different. Going to visit somewhere, you're like, oh, that was a cool experience. And I love the culture and the food. Then you get thrown into the dead of winter in Europe. It's freezing, it's wet, it's muddy.
Yeah.
I'm struggling in the mud and ruts. It's the opposite of what I grew up with. And here we are in Europe now, and a little bit of money I think my dad had set aside, we were burning through, and it wasn't pleasant, it wasn't fun, it wasn't I think at that age I didn't put a lot of thought into it or really knew what to expect. I was pretty obviously naive, but I knew what I wanted, which was to be a top motocrosser. And it turned out to actually be a lot harder than I think even I thought. I didn't go there with a cocky attitude, but I certainly believe I'll be battling at some point for race wins, and then all of a sudden you go there and it's like, don't qualify for a GP because straight up just wasn't fast enough. Was a bit of a humbling moment. You go from being untouchable in your home country, and then you go to Europe and you're just a nobody. You're not even a gate filler. You didn't make the gate. So
and you know what, Grant, we see that locally where you see guys riding the expert class in their district and they're dominating, and then they get to a national and it's a different ball game and they don't qualify. So I wouldn't say that's a part of it for everybody, but it certainly looks like it. But not everybody goes on to do what you did. They realize that it's a different game at that level, and they can't compete.
For sure. And it was certainly a very humbling experience. But to get back to your original question,
yes,
I believe it was in France. So what happened was I was a little bit spoiled where the team I rode for, Harry Everts, ran it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a Belgian, wealthy Belgian businessman that sort of funded the team. And the very first GP was Brazil. They had canceled Indonesia. I don't know why, but obviously probably money in politics, but who knows. But Brazil was the away race. So how the Grand Prix worked back then is they would pay, if it was during the season, they paid for the top 15 riders, I think mechanic, team manager, and +1 and the bikes and all that. That's part of what FIM do. But with it being the opening round, it was the top 15 riders from the previous year. And if guys moved out, they go down to 16th and 17th and what else. But obviously being a complete rookie, we were not getting our travel paid for. So fortunately, the money guy behind the team paid for us to go down there. Well, there was only about 22 European riders that showed up. The rest were local. So I qualified for my first GP. And at the time, I was, I believe, the youngest, either the youngest or just behind Tortelli. Now it's Ken Roxon. But so I got to line up and race at the very first GP I showed up at. But like I said, it was a bit of a misleading, a bit of a tease, because the next round was in Spain. And I'll never forget, I think I was 1 or 2 hundredths of a second off from qualifying, but I was 41st, and they always take the reserve riders. And everyone said, don't worry, you'll get to race. At least second moto for sure. Sometimes even the first moto, because with all the practices and qualifying, a lot of times injuries happen and guys didn't show up. Well, lined up, got geared up, and you're watching everyone load up in the gates, and I'm like, dang it, and I never got to race. And then I think it was one of those, all right, we'll get them next time. And it was England, Foxhills, and I was 43rd fastest. Didn't even get reserve, and I was like starting to get a little bit almost depressing, because I felt like I was going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't really realize what was going on. We were pretty young and naive, but I didn't have the stamina to do the 40-minute +2 lap motos back then. I think between age and then coming from South Africa, where our motos are exactly half of that, it was, trying to build up the stamina. I was doing so many motos, I think I started losing that kind of raw speed from doing, it's like jogging all the time and then trying to line up for a 100-meter sprint.
Sure.
You kind of almost forget that speed and that pace. So After the Foxhills thing, it was like, all right, we know what to work on. We're going to get this sorted out. And I think the day that it kind of was that miserable day where I just felt like, I don't want to say giving up, but I was so homesick. I was, I wasn't enjoying life. And, my dad's there with me, and my uncle, I think at that point, had come over to help out a little bit. And there's nothing worse than when your whole life revolves around something and it's not going well.
Yeah.
And I think it was muddy that day. And again, I just didn't qualify because I couldn't put a lap together in the mud. And there's so many Europeans that are good at that. And just now you're starting to think, I can't even qualify. My dream was to come here and be a world champion. I can't even qualify. And it was really, I think, just tough for a number of reasons. My age. So obviously you're a little immature. You don't know how to handle things. The stress of feeling like you're letting the family down. And I think what happened was I was just so down and bummed out. And all I could think about was the good times in South Africa. And I just wanted to go back home.
Yeah.
And back to your statement, my dad reminded me, we don't have a home. Basically said, I effing sold it so that, we could chase your dream. And now you want to give up like this. Not going to happen. And I think a lot of people might say that, those are some harsh words or there was some tough love. But, I can look back now and go, I am so thankful that we didn't have a home as a backup plan and all that stuff, because I truly think we would have just left.
Yeah.
And no one would know my name right now. We wouldn't be having this interview. So it was certainly a pivotal moment. It was not easy, but it was kind of crazy. It seemed like right after that, I often use the term like that sort of come to Jesus talk.
Sure.
It was just weird. Things just started turning around for the better. And it seemed like from that day on, everything just started getting better.
Yeah.
Getting used to Europe, started qualifying, started getting closer to the points, started then battling top tens. And it was just, you woke up driven to be better at the next race and to get better results and all that. And it started becoming, exciting, almost like a drug. Just, we're doing this, we're actually making it happen, So, well, 1998 was not an easy year for me, but it was a very pivotal year for sure.
Now, you were talking about missing home, and you and your dad pack up and you leave South Africa to go to Europe. You're only 15 years old. You got to have roots there, family, friends. What was the chain of events that took place that you and your dad said, yeah, we're going to do this? Obviously you were doing well in South Africa as a racer, but your father sold your house. People over here are, we're going to mortgage the house and get a motorhome, and we're going to go to Loretta Lynn's. Yeah, but when it's over, you're going to drive home, and if it doesn't work out, you're going to sell your motorhome, and that's going to be the end of it. You went to another continent. What chain of events took place, and how did that all come about?
Well, the more I think about it, the more I think my dad's crazy. So that's step number one, because he took a huge gamble. But in 1997, I actually went to Europe and did a European championship. So I had, in 95, we went to England. We actually went to Ireland and did the final round of the British Schoolboy Championship to get some international experience. And the reason we went there was easier flight, and Kawasaki UK actually used to kind of oversee Kawasaki South Africa, so we knew we would have some support for that race.
Okay.
The guy from Kawasaki South Africa was like, this kid's really good, trust me. I think they were like, yeah, we'll give him a bike, no worries. And then I went, absolutely smoked their riders, which their top guy at the time was Billy McKenzie. And certainly I think they weren't expecting that. But, went there in 95. Then 96, I came to the States and did the World Minis and battled with Pastrana and all those guys, got on the podium. But then I moved up to 125s at the, after the Nationals in South Africa in 96. So 97 was my first year in 125. And we actually went to Italy and did a European championship. And I think it was there, because like I said, I was just a kid. I was probably playing with dirt bikes in the sand between motos where, my dad was out trying to, talk to people and network and like, hey, almost like, look at my boy type of thing, just hoping that someone would notice. And then we ended up at a practice track in Belgium, and I forget how the chain of events led to it, but we ended up being able to have a chance to ride in front of Harry Everts because we found out that they were starting this team, and they were even getting, I believe, funding from the Belgian government for junior riders. So it had to be like teenagers as like a development team for the Grand Prix. And somehow it just ended up working out where Harry saw me ride, and to Harry's credit, he said to my dad something along the lines of, that kid's got something special. And so, of course, my dad was stoked, and it wasn't like negotiating, like how much are you going to get paid or anything like that. It was like, all right, this is what we can help you do. The rest is on you. And it was pretty much like we can get bikes, parts, and I think that was really it, gear and all that stuff. But it was no taking care of living costs or anything. But we ended up, the owner of Doma Exhaust, Dominique, for some reason, he liked us, and he actually put us up in one of his apartments and all that. So when we left this test, it was pretty much left at, if you come over, here's what we can do, and here's the program, the rest is on you. And kind of, obviously, my dad tried to put this all together, sold what little we had, and we moved over with a couple suitcases, and we were sharing a one-bedroom apartment in Belgium.
Well, that was my next question. I was wondering where your home base was at that point, and Belgium that's the place to be if you're going to be a racer.
Yeah, we were it was a little town. It actually was a pretty cool little town. I think it was, once I started getting used to just Europe being so different to how I grew up, and the weather and everything, the language, just grocery stores are different, everything's different.
Yeah.
But once you start kind of figuring it out and making the most of it, the town was called Bilzen, and it's not too far from where a lot of the guys have lived, like even Caroli and that, who's an Italian but lives in Belgium most of the year. And it's not far from Lommel, a lot of the main tracks that are just absolutely nasty. And trying to learn to ride that in the winter when you can't feel your hands or your face was definitely a big learning experience.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. So at that point, KTM's helping you out, but there's no financial compensation. You're on your own.
This is before KTM. My first year there, I was on Kawasaki's.
Okay.
It was just this privateer team that Harry Everett and his business partner had put together. And then, like I said, I didn't qualify for a few Grand Prix, then started qualifying, then started scoring in the points. And then I think it was maybe in Germany, it might have been the last round, second last round. I just rattled off a couple back-to-back top 10 finishes, and I think I had like an 8th in that moto. And KTM was looking to expand on because this was the new KTM when the old KTM went bankrupt in the early 90s and then got bought out. And the new owner, Mr. Pierre, put the focus on the 4-stroke and the 500 class, and then he just wanted to basically chase this 125 World Championship. And we ended up getting approached by KTM, and it was one of those things where I still remember my dad goes, well, here's the good news.
Yeah.
He goes, if you don't do well, people can blame the bike because you're kind of a nobody right now. He goes, but if you do well, everyone's going to think that you're the man type thing. And so long story short, the KTM offer was a good deal, considering there was no money, but everything else was taken care of. There was bonuses, accommodation, and a motorhome to travel in, and all that stuff. So it was certainly, when you're counting pennies, it was a big step up. And just the fact of having a factory behind you made a big difference. But they, to give them credit, they made a lot of improvement in a short amount of time. I remember we went testing and things were breaking pretty regularly. And I still remember one point going, oh boy, this is not going to be a good season. But that not having that production rule, those KTM guys, they just made things happen in a short amount of time. And I remember at one point thinking, man, this bike is a rocket ship, because I came off a KX125 that handled well, but didn't seem to have much power. And then I went to KTM that had all the power in the world, and we were trying to get it to handle. So it was interesting, but straight away I was better on that bike, and was a top 10 guy at 99, and ended up breaking my scaphoid and missing a few rounds. But later that year, I dominated the German Grand Prix, went 1-1. And I think that was the moment that kind of everyone took a step back and was like, yeah, this guy's for real. I think I just turned 17. So, people were like, this kid's young and he's made a huge amount of progress. And then that's when I had multiple offers, and ended up re-signing with KTM. And actually, for the first time ever, got a salary. So going to 2000 was kind of exciting.
So in that time, I mean, do you guys just stay in Belgium, or are there any trips back home to Durban?
Well, when I stayed in Belgium in '98 when I rode for Harry Everts, but when I signed with KTM, the team was ran out of Holland by Kees van der Ven.
Okay.
And so we actually moved into Holland to Holland. It sounds like a big deal. We changed countries. I think there was a 45-minute drive, and not a whole lot changes, but I enjoyed Holland. But we did go back. I know we were tight in money, but I think we went back in. At the end of '98, I actually had a South African sponsor that helped out, and he paid for our tickets to go back to South Africa. At the end of '99, I actually came to America and spent a few weeks in the off season just to ride here with some good weather. And you might ask why, but one of the reasons I think was, in the back of my mind, I had this kind of long-term goal, which was, I'm going to win the World Championship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to leave America, and I'm going to follow my hero's footsteps, Greg Albertine, and I'm going to go to America and race Supercross and motocross and win there as well. So at the end of '99, I actually came to America and spent a few weeks here in Southern California, and I really enjoyed it. Loved the weather and the lifestyle. I'm like, yeah, this is more me. So when I went back to Europe, I remember going into 2000, and I'm like, I'm going to win this world title, and then I'm going to the States. Like, that is what I'm doing. So I had a very clear focus of what I wanted, and I wanted it bad. And fortunately, it worked out. Had a great 2000 season, was very consistent. I wouldn't consider myself a mud rider, and we had quite a few mud races that year, and I made the most of it, whether it was a fourth or a fifth or whatever. But all the other GPs where I kind of had a feeling I could win, I pretty much won all of them except Italy because of a second motor pileup, which just was one of those things. But I was strong there too. But it was a good season. Won the Dutch Championship back-to-back, 99, 2000 for Champ KTM. Won the world title. But long before I even won the world title, the phone started ringing. And one of the first people that actually ever called me was Mitch Payton.
Okay. Of course, the pro circuit.
Yep. So he called me. Gosh, I was trying to figure it out. It was either on the way to the 5th round or the 4th round. But I know I had just taken the lead in the World Championship, because I think I got like 4th and 2nd at the first 2 races, and then I went 1-1. And now these are the days I'm styling. I'm a top rider, so I have a cell phone that works, and I don't even know what made me answer the phone. Probably because I didn't get many phone calls, but I answered the phone, and it totally caught me off guard, because it's like, we always, usually anyone that calls me, it's like, hey, Grant, with a South African accent or an English accent or something, and I get this, is this Grant Langston? I'm like, yeah. He goes, Grant, this is Mitch Payton from Pro Circuit Kawasaki. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, I know exactly who you are.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, Mitch. He goes, yeah, man, I've been keeping an eye on the results. Doing pretty good. I was like, oh, thanks. Really appreciate it. He goes, you have any interest in coming to America? And I was like, hell yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that started the ball rolling. And this was, I think it was a 16-round series. So my head was going all over the place because now we're talking to Kawasaki in America. KTM are like, whoa, hang on a second. You know, you're not going anywhere. And then I remember Husky offered me a big contract to stay in Europe, but defend. They wanted the number one plate on a Husqvarna. And I remember they offered me what I considered a big salary at that time. So, I mean, it was just like, here I am, a kid trying to chase my dream. All of a sudden, it's like, you got people coming to you, and here's my dad, who's now a business manager as well, and, you know, trying to do the best for me. And it was a crazy time because it's not like anyone told me this is how it goes. You know, you're just living it going, wow, this is nuts.
Yeah.
Like, we couldn't rub 2 cents together 12 months ago. Now we've got people offering us hundreds of thousands of dollars just to sign a contract, you know, and you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, I just remember going, this is crazy. You know, I never really thought about the money as a kid. I kind of knew that the top guys made money, but it wasn't something I thought too much about. And then you start looking at things and you're like, holy crap, this, you know, like things got real.
Yeah. And you know what? You dominated that year too. I mean, you won 7 out of 16 Grand Prix. So
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone's antenna was up and had their eye on you. Hey, Grant, while I'm thinking about it, who are some other guys? Who was the world champion before you were? Who were some other guys that were in that class that year?
Well, Coyote had won 3 in a row.
And
it was funny because I remember 98 when I didn't qualify, you know, watching him and just going, man, I wish I could be as fast as him. And then in 2000, he actually came to America, did some supercrosses. I think he had a couple podiums, you know, a lot of 4ths and 5ths. And then for whatever reason, I think it was the production rule, but that Ferrari Husqvarna team, it just sounded like it was just nothing like. I mean, that Husqvarna at the GPs, I mean, when I said that thing barked, it was unreal. You know, when you look at it, you're like, that's not a Husky.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that's an OEM part on that bike is a sticker that says Husky. Everything, I mean, his front number plate was carbon fiber, you know, and they had this super thin vinyl number 1 on it to save weight. I'm just, you know, I'm looking at this stuff just going, holy crap, this is a whole nother level. But yeah, Coyote had sort of dominated the 125 class. Jamie Dobb had been a top guy. He was actually probably the favorite going into 2000 on paper. I think most people thought Dobb would win. I think they thought, you know, there was a couple other riders that were strong, like Villemin. No, sorry, he had left. That was 99. But, you know, guys, there were a couple of French guys, Italian guys. Mike Brown was also supposed to be, you know, a title contender.
yeah.
And I think at best people would be like, yeah, you know, he's fast. He might win a race or two, but, you know, he's a kid. You know, he doesn't have the consistency to win a world title. And I think that's where I shocked a lot of people. And even when I look back, I was very consistent that year. And I probably should have won 9 GPs, but I had a gearbox break and I got stuck in first gear at Croatia, which cost me the overall. And like I said, in Italy, I got piled in from behind, which, you know, they say get the whole shot. That way you don't get the first turn pileup. But when you have to brake and people don't, you know, it was one of those. So I went first and then I was at the bottom of the pileup. But, you know, anyway.
Sure.
Getting back to it, even when I didn't win, I was 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. So, I even surprised myself in that aspect. I truly believed that I was going to be fast and win races. I just was hoping sort of deep down that I didn't blow it on the bad days, like have a mud race and like get no points or get stuck in the infield, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So fortunately, even though you always feel like you could have won more, done better, it was a good season.
Now, Grant, let me ask you this. I mean, there are different tracks throughout Europe. You're racing GPs. Some weeks it's rocky and it's hard. Some weeks, I guess, when you're over in Holland and places like that, it's sandy. How different? What was the terrain like in South Africa, where you grew up and what you first started to train on? Is it sand there?
Well, what's funny is where I grew up, we didn't have, you know, like I look at like where I live now in Southern California. The tracks are groomed. Everything's like, you know, top notch. Our tracks were never groomed. They were never watered. I mean, we waited, like when it rained, it'd be like, if we knew rain was coming, it's like, oh, we got to go to the track tomorrow. You know, at least we can see if I'm following someone for once.
Oh.
So they were very raw and organic. But with that said, we were able to find just a good enough, like there was a riverbed over here that we used to go ride at. And, you know, as long as there wasn't floods, we could ride it. You know, and then there was this turn track on the side of the hill that we had. So we used to work on off cambers and all that stuff. And then, so I do think, considering how, you know, raw and unorganized it was, we were exposed to a variety of surfaces and conditions.
Right.
As a kid. So I definitely not big deep sand or, you know, this, you know, French Italian type tracks. You got this clay and big drop offs where I remember thinking, man, you got to have some big kahunas to just sand it off these things. We, you know, almost every one of our tracks we had, I felt like were in someone's back of their farm, you know. So it was a flat piece of dirt, and they put a few jumps on it and some berms. It was more like a BMX track. Right. So the variety of GP tracks, absolutely huge variety. I'll give you a story. This is no joke. In '98, riding for Harry Everts, one of the cool things was being able to go and ride with Stefan Everts, you know, a fair bit. You know, and anyone who knows racing knows Stefan was just phenomenal, especially in the deep sand, mud, and like, guy was unbelievable. But we went to this quarry, like this rock quarry, and my teammate was actually Steve Ramon, who happened to go on to be the 125 and 250 world champion down the road. But, you know, he was quicker than me on average in the beginning of '98. So whenever we went riding, it was like he was the target type thing. Like, what's his lap times, you know? And I just wanted to be quicker than him so bad. And we go to this quarry, and I'm not joking. We're doing a 40-minute moto. Like, my dad's putting his lap time, my lap time, and we're doing like 3:30 was like our best, but we're doing like 3:31s, 3:32s. Stefan Everts was doing 2:58s, 2:59s.
Wow.
I swear. And I said to my dad, I go, there's no way. I go, he's obviously doing a different track, because there was a part where the quarry went through the trees.
Yeah.
So I swear, I went out. I'm like, I'm going to go and see where, not where he's cut the track, but where we're riding along a loop. And I walked around, and I could not find where he was cutting the track. And I came back, but now I'm walking, so I come back. I'm like, what was his lap time? So I watched him, and I'm like, he looks decent. Didn't look phenomenal. Oh, he just did a 2:57 at the end of his 45-minute moto. I'm like, no. Like, yeah, look. And everyone's holding this stuff. I'm like, how? I try to follow him. It was the biggest, just mind-blowing moment. I'm like, he's not riding the same part of the track that I am. I'm in every hole, and he's going on top or skipping over the big holes and landing in the pockets and all that. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, I'm doing everything wrong. Yeah. Like, but then you realize, all right, well, I'll just do what he does, which is easier said than done. Then you realize, oh, I have to carry a hell of a lot more corner speed and be launching the bike mid-turn to get into that pocket where he's at. But then once you got that, it was like the track was totally different. And anyway, it was just an incredible moment. It was, I have a ton of respect for the Everts family. They were, you know, super nice and helpful. Harry did a lot for me in my career. And he helped keep my head up when I was down. Like when I wanted to leave Europe, quit.
Yeah.
He actually said to me, he goes, I still remember he kind of had me in a headlock, and he had this little smirk, and he always had that cigarette hanging out the side of his mouth. And he goes, kid, you're special. Just remember that. He goes, I think one day you'll be a world champion. And I literally looked at him and I said, don't patronize me, please. And he said, you know, no, I'm serious. And I really just thought, yeah, that was nice. He's trying to get my spirits up. But I still never forget the day I won the world championship. You know, everyone's hugging you, high-fiving, and the dust had settled a little bit, and we were in the pits, and there comes Harry, and I swear he had the same smirk on his face. He stuck his hand out, shook my hand, and he just tapped me in the chest with his finger. He goes, I told you.
Yeah. Where was that, Grant? What track was that?
Heinola, Finland.
Okay.
It was just an incredible weekend. I was fastest in every practice, qualifying, dominated both motos. and I still remember. I think it was the first time I ever cried out of pure joy.
Yeah.
And I think it was because it was the first time I think I'd ever seen my dad and my uncle cry. And it was just like the moment hit us. We were like, this is like that whole dream we talked about. It didn't look very good. I mean, it was only 2 years prior to that. It did not look good, you know.
Yeah.
And so it really was a group effort. You know, my dad, I would say, is definitely was on the tougher side at that point, but I wouldn't have changed anything looking back. And I had Harry, who, you know, was the voice of reason. You know, just, hey, don't build Rome in a day. You know, just do this, work at that. Let's try this. You need to find some speed there. Change your line there. And then it was just like I said. It was like things just started opening up. You saw things in a whole different light.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a great learning experience. I loved my time in Europe, but I was keen to get out of there.
Now, we were talking a moment ago about Mitch Payton calling you, and you were going to go to the pro circuit team, but KTM didn't want to let you go.
KTM had first right of refusal, and you know, they wanted me bad, and Red Bull was getting behind the team to help them financially and all this. And you know, after winning a world title and having all that success, and Kurt Nickel was the one driving KTM on this worldwide basis, you know, at that point, KTM was starting to become the dominant force in Europe. And, you know, of course, they wanted to move to America. And knowing that I wanted to come, it was like, oh, perfect time. We've got Red Bull money. We've got Langston wanting to go there, and we want to be there. So I also thought it was the perfect combination, too. I was like, I remember riding that Cowie 125 in 98. It was like riding your sewing machine. It was so slow. And I knew the KTM was a rocket ship. And I kept thinking, you know, with the success we had, the progression and the direction and Red Bull and all this, I was convinced it was the best option.
Right.
Was to stay on KTM. Now, not bashing them at all, I look back and I really think the better decision probably would have been to go on pro circuit. I think Mitch was operating at a whole nother level than the European Kawasaki team at the time. So I think with the non-production rule, I think KTM was the bike to be on. And when we hit this production rule, because when I came to the States, all of a sudden I'm like, this bike's just not as good as the bike in Europe.
Mm.
And I was like, well, you know, your frame was a one-off, and your swing arm was a one-off, and that suspension's a one-off, you know, so it was a true factory bike. And, you know, then we got the production rule, and I remember thinking, gosh, I didn't really anticipate taking a step backwards. And I also think that can affect any racer mentally when you feel like, wait a minute, we're supposed to be moving forward in our career. This is like a little step back. But it was still a good bike, don't get me wrong. I just think that I think it's Supercross, they were underprepared, and the PDS just is not designed for whoops, that's for sure, or a lot of motion very quickly. So there was those growing pains as well. But, you know, like I said, I made my decision to sign with KTM. I don't regret it. Obviously, it's always easy to sit back and go, maybe probably riding for Mitch probably would have been the better decision. But at the time, the KTM deal just felt right. And it felt like you were staying a little bit. You know, that was the other thing. We were leaving Europe, at least keeping some of those same people in the team, you know, because the engine builder came over from Europe, you know, a couple of mechanics. So KTM brought some of the people over. So there was familiar faces. So it just felt like, hey, we're doing this whole transition thing. Rather do it with some familiar faces and people you know than just kind of winging it is what it felt, you know, by taking another option. Like, let's just hope the bike's good. Let's hope we like the team. But we don't know anyone, you know. So it was just a family decision that we decided. But like I said, I think it was really cool. I was able to win KTM's first ever Supercross. And then the 01 season was a bit of a roller coaster. Had some injuries, had some great races. And yeah, it was a bummer to lose it to a broken rear wheel, which kind of felt out of my control. But you know, that's racing.
That's, yeah.
I know you've interviewed many people that can talk about breakdowns.
Sure.
You know, that was a common thing in the 70s and 80s. But yeah, to have a wheel break with the championship in hand with 2 laps to go, or a lap and a half to go, was pretty gut wrenching.
Grant, I want to know this. You know, you stayed with KTM. You talked to Mitch Payton. You're dreaming of coming to America. This guy wants you to come here. He wants to give you a ride on Pro Circuit, but you stay with KTM. Do you have to call Mitch Payton and tell him what your decision is going to be, and how difficult was that call?
It definitely was difficult. Funny enough, at one point, it was actually, I remember, because I still remember going, who's this Bruce guy? And it was Bruce Sternstrom, because it got to a point where Bruce could say, yes, as Cowie, we can spend that. So I didn't realize how the dynamic worked, but, you know, it's Pro Circuit, but most of that money, or the money paying the riders and going to the team, comes from Kawasaki directly. And I remember I think we were just on the phone, and, you know, I'm still, when we told him no thanks, I was still 17. And I remember saying to my dad, I can't tell him, you tell him. Just tell him that I'm really sorry, you know. And I'm like telling my dad, you have to tell them I can't physically do it. Like I still felt like a kid, and I felt like a failure. I don't even know how to explain it. I'm like, I can't tell them this. Because, you know, when you hear on the phone, they're like, we really would love to have you. We think you're a great rider. And you're hearing all this great stuff. And you're like, wow, these guys really love me, you know. And now you're going to be like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I'm like, I can't do that. So my dad told Bruce, and I still remember I hand wrote a letter to Mitch, and I faxed it to him, because we had his fax number, because he had faxed a letter of intent at one point that we were thinking of signing. KTM did the whoa, hang on. So I remember faxing this letter to Mitch Payton, and one of the things, you know, obviously I said, I really, really appreciate the interest, and that this is really hard for me, and it's a tough decision. I told him I did it mainly out of loyalty to KTM. But I know at the bottom of the letter, I put, I really hope one day I have the opportunity to race for you, right, and that we get to work together. And the reason I remember that part of the fax was because fast forward 4 years after parting ways with KTM, I end up going to Pro Circuit, and I'm sitting down talking to Mitch. And I still remember I laughed. I'm like, you're like a little high school chick. He pulls out this fax and he turns around and he points to the last line of this letter that says, I really hope to have the opportunity to ride for you one day. Oh. And I was like, no way. Yeah. You know, I was really mind blown. You know, I'm thinking like, Mitch Payton doesn't keep crap like that. You know, like he threw that in the trash. He had it in his desk. He found it. He pulled it out and he showed it to me. And I still remember thinking, wow, that's really cool.
That is an incredible story. I mean, and when you think about a fax, they used to fade, used to rip them off the machine, throw them away.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the end of it. It wasn't like an email where you can go back 4 years and find it.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm that hybrid from just born in the late stage of the old era to just still trying to figure out nowadays technology. So yeah. I'm like in between the old man age and the young kid age. So yeah, I remember faxing and that sound of trying to get dial-up network and hoping you could have an online conversation, because it was way cheaper than cell phones back then. So yeah, we went through it all.
In 2003, you were still on KTM, and you know, it's incredible. When I was doing the research, Grant, you got to ride with so many amazing people. I mean, Jeremy McGrath. You and McGrath are on KTM at the same time. But you guys are supposed to get 252 strokes, but it never materialized. What happened?
I think, you know, after 01 and 02 and even 03, KTM, especially in America, their sales just skyrocketed. Like I know in 01, you know, when the National started, I dominated the first 2 rounds. Mm-hmm. And I remember at a KTM sales meeting, they were like, yeah, it's great that we're winning, but we don't have any bikes to sell because there's no bikes in the country. You know, the thing was one of those things, what but one on Sundays, sold on Mondays, and KTM, really their sales took off at that point. And then where I'm going with this is in 2003, or at the end of 2002, I was ready. I wanted to move up. And KTM basically had a hand-built, almost basically like a factory, GP. It would have been fine for GPs because there's no production rule.
Yeah.
But they built a one-off hand-made motorcycle. And I remember because Jeremy tested it and was like, this thing's pretty good. And the following week, I got to test it. And then, of course, they're telling you, hey, this is just the prototype. It's only going to get better from here. We're going to do this, do that. So we were sort of sold on this dream, or what we thought was meant to be reality. And then they had production issues. They didn't get their building in America they wanted. And, a few things happened. And then it basically was like, hey, we're not going to be able to get that bike homologated. You're going to have to ride the production bike. And then when we went to the production bike, it was kind of, honestly, it was a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was always, all I knew of Jeremy he was smooth. He barely ever hit the ground. And then all of a sudden we'd be out testing and Jeremy was on the ground every 5 minutes. I was hitting the ground, and obviously Jeremy had already made a name for himself. So he just said, you know what, I'm out. I was there going, shoot, well, I'm 20 years old and, supposed to be at the peak of my career and things aren't going so good. So I got injured in Supercross because we did actually, people forget we did the first 2 rounds of the World Supercross. So I got KTM's first, big bike podium at round 1, and I beat Jeremy, and I could tell he was just, I remember after the Dutch round, him sitting in a chair, and it's funny looking back. I remember looking at him thinking, like, this looks like a guy that wants to quit. And it was shortly after that he did quit. Wow. So I think I was looking at that face, and but then I got injured. I crashed. I got ejected in the whoops at Anaheim 1. And I remember looking at photos, going, "That's not normal." Like I got ejected midway through, like not got sideways or got loose. Like the suspension would just pack the rear shock and then just unload. It would literally hit you in the ass. It was like, have you ever seen those videos where people sit on airbags and make them explode and they get popcorn or whatever? Yeah. That's what it felt like. And got to a point where I was scared of the bike. I didn't even want to race. I didn't want to retire, but I didn't want to race the thing.
But that was on the 250. That was on the 250, Grant?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, in 2003. And then basically what happened was I was talking to Kurt Nickel and probably just had a conversation like what I just explained to you. Like I'm scared of the bike. I don't want to ride it. Like, and he said, I still remember he said, "Would you want to drop down to the 125s?" I said, "Oh, hell yeah." And he goes, "They're gonna want to cut your pay, right?" And I said, "Well, you know what? At this point, I feel like I'd make more money in bonuses,
Did they cut it?
And they did cut my salary, yes. But what I did do is I said, all right, because their attitude was 250 guys get paid a lot more than 125 guys. You were paid to be a 250 guy. So I said, that's fine. So I took a pay cut. We renegotiated like a temporary contract within a contract. I don't even know how that worked out. But I even said, on that 125, I will win. And so I just said, if you're going to cut my pay, I want big bonuses for first place. And I still remember they were like, you think you can beat James Stewart? And I was like, yep. Well, I was dealing with injuries, and I was not going to beat James on pure speed that year. But, he got hurt at the last round of Supercross. Mm-hmm. And that also changed the game, because all of a sudden me and Hughes and Brown were just taking each other out, stuffing each other off the start. And Stewart was just winning race after race after race while we were all having this internal battle. But I was dealing with a wrist injury, and I got really sick. I got some sort of a fever or something at Washougal. I mean, it was the year where you feel like there was no way I was going to win, because I wasn't riding great. I was dealing with injuries. I was icing my wrist all the time. I had been sick. It just felt like nothing was going my way. And lo and behold, championships are decided by who gets the most points. And once again, through consistency and only winning one race, I was able to win the championship. And I remember when Kurt Nichols said, "Do you think you can beat James Stewart?" This was before Stewart got hurt, obviously.
Yeah.
I said, "Hey, Kurt, I'm looking at this bonus structure. I think it was like $250 for first in the championship. And I don't know if it was 100 and then 50 for like second and third, or it was something, 150, 100. And I looked at him and I said, "Kurt, take second and third and put that on top of first place." So, if you want typically a 125cc title back then, I think most of the bonuses were pretty kind of similar because a lot of them were insured by the same company. But I think it was roughly about 250 was what the championship paid, and mine was 500,000. And
Yeah.
And like I said, I ended up winning the championship, and I remember afterwards going, "Wow, that was certainly some risky betting." I was very confident, but I'm like, you know what? Doesn't matter how you make the sausage. It's just how it works out at the end. And I'm like, that sausage making process was not good this year, but I won the title, and people have said, "Well, James was the fastest guy, and this and that." And I go, fair enough. But in 01, I felt like I was the best guy and should have been champion. And sometimes years go like that, injuries, mechanicals, and you don't win. And then some years when you're like, it's just not my year, like 03, I felt just from start to finish, did not feel like my year until I won the championship. So I think I only led with the last, 2 rounds, and that was it. I didn't lead the series at all. So, whereas 01, I had a big points lead until I got hurt. So it's just funny how these things work sometimes. And I think every rider has a story of maybe I wasn't the fastest guy, but I won the title. And other years they go, "Man, I was the fastest guy, but it just didn't work out."
Yeah, and in 03 too, Grant, you won that championship under, it was kind of a chain of strange events, really, where you got a phone call. It was the last race. Tell us about that.
So Troy, Ohio was meant to be like round 9 of 12 or something like that, or 10 of 12. And they had been having, God, I remember, I was staying out at Brock Sellard's house in Ohio. I was staying out there to ride and train in the humid conditions, and there was nowhere to ride and train because everything was underwater. So it was kind of crazy, just how it all worked out. But anyone that remembers Troy, Ohio, it's built next to a river, but it's also in a floodplain. It might be a once in 100-year floodplain, but it was that 1 in 100-year flood apparently, or something. But they postponed the race till after Glen Helen, the final round. Oh no, wait, Steel City, and sorry, Glen Helen was the opening round. Steel City was the final round, so they postponed it afterwards. So, but I still remember actually at Steel City, Larry Brooks. At this point, me and Ryan Hughes, we didn't talk. We were actually in separate trucks. I was in the 250 truck. He was in the 125 truck, and they split the team up a little bit because there was tension. Rhino's not the best at keeping the peace in the pits either. I think anyone that knows Rhino knows his personality. So we didn't get along, and we were basically separated by you stay in your truck and you stay in your truck.
Yeah.
And but I remember Larry Brooks said that he told me, Rhino, and everyone, he said, "Hey, it's still pissing down rain in Ohio. Troy is underwater." He said, "The word is from AMA, this is probably the last race of the season." And I remember, because Rhino actually brought this up, he said to me on the sideline, "I'm going to get a jump on you and chop you off." And I was like, I think I just looked at him and just ignored him. And I didn't get the jump, and he did chop me off, and I got buried in the pack. And I remember I was just like, God damn it, this is going to chip into my points lead. And then the second moto, that was going in the second moto. And I ended up running him down, and I kind of stuffed him. I wouldn't normally have, but I stuffed him in a turn, and I reeled him in past him and beat him straight up. And I know he said, "Oh, if there was Troy, Ohio, I would have won and won the championship." But I at least feel like I can't control Mother Nature or the decisions of the AMA. I never got a chance to vote or anything. I even said, because Rhino was telling Larry Brooks, "You need to protest. We need to have another race at Glen Helen." And I was like, "Oh, bring on Glen Helen. That's my house.
Yeah.
I kick ass there." And we were at Brock's house, and I was still thinking, I don't know what's going to happen. And it was a funny dynamic because I remember Pingree was there and Reed and all these guys who were out of championship battles and that. They were just like, get the season over with so we can freaking hang out and relax. And apparently the AMA was trying to call me, but Brock lives in the middle of nowhere, so there's no cell service. So they obviously did this whole roadmap thing and realized where we were and called Brock's landline. But anyone who knows Brock Sellers knows he's the biggest prankster jokester you'll ever meet. So he comes down, he goes, "Hey GL, the AMA's on the phone. The last race is canceled. You're the champ." And I'm like, ha ha ha. Like, I think I actually said, "Not funny." And he's like, "I wouldn't joke about something like that." And I'm like looking at him going, "Yeah, right." And I walked upstairs and they were obviously in some boardroom or something, and I was on speakerphone, and I remember hearing Davey Coons, I think it was Duke Finch, and and they're like, "We just want to let you know, Troy Ohio is not happening. So this year, there'll be 11 rounds officially, and the series is over, and you're the national champion. Congratulations." And I was like, "Well, this is weird. This is not how it's supposed to go." But it was weird because I'm on the phone, and now I've got all these other riders and mechanics and their wives, and I mean, there was literally a group of like probably 30 of us, and they're just jumping on me and hugging, and everyone just, "Let's party, we're getting wasted," and I was standing there kind of like looking around, everyone's hugging me, and I still remember just going, "No, this is these guys are messing with me." Like I couldn't accept it at that moment that's how it went. It's hard to explain, but
no, I mean, it might be hard to explain, Grant, but you can picture it in your head. You're battling it out all year. You and Ryan Hughes, it's KTM. You're at Sellard's house. There's a race. I mean, it can't even be possible. It doesn't. You couldn't. The only thing that makes it real is you couldn't make up a story like this.
Yeah, believe me. So it was certainly a strange way, and it felt like it just took time to digest.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember exactly what happened. I think some of the wives and girlfriends just like went to the liquor store and the grocery store. And it was, like I said, we were in Ohio. And as you can imagine, the race was canceled 2 hours away because it was underwater. It never stopped raining where we were. And it went from, we were athletes and that. I didn't drink at that point in my career or life. It was maybe if you won, you celebrated a little bit here or there. But all of a sudden, drinks are being poured. We're just getting hammered.
Right.
And one thing leads to another. And I ended up buying 4 KLX 110s from Fred Andrews' dealership that was like 30 minutes away. Just riding. No, I think I swiped my credit card. And we bought these 110s, and Chad bought a couple. We just bought everything that he had on the floor and went back to Brock's house and was going around, just completely out of control. We were going through his pole barn, and then it was the only part of the track that wasn't wet, so we flooded the floor. Then someone decided to put dish soap, and we were just eating crap everywhere. I mean, it was the biggest shit show you've ever seen. I remember Tedesco was there. Josh Hansen, I think, got drunk for the first time and started crying because he said he was a failure to the Hansen name because his dad was a champ and he wasn't. And we had to talk him off the ledge. And it was just an absolute unexpected, unplanned, unfiltered, complete shit show. But yeah, it was a blur. And then I ended up obviously just flying home and then it was weird. Then it was like, had to go to KTM. They had all the press there. And I'm walking in and I'm holding up this number 1 plate and it's all staged. And I'm like, God, this is so weird. This is not how I thought it would go, you know. But, you know, I've certainly always been involved in what seems to be some crazy situations. So.
Yeah, and it seems that your career has just gone that way. Hey, talking about Ryan Hughes, I mean, did you ever patch things up with him? Do you talk to him if you see him today?
Yeah, we talk. We're not BFF or anything like that.
Right.
I think Ryan has also chilled out. I think he was the competitor that tried to get under your skin, and it obviously worked pretty well.
Yeah.
And I was the kind of guy, I always felt like, you know, don't piss me off, because the minute you piss me off, when I put my helmet on, I also turn into an asshole, and I'm like, we'll get into it type thing. So I think once racing was done and settled, I mean, I'll be straight up. I hated Mike Brown. I hated Ryan Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
When I see them now, you know, half the time we end up hugging each other, you know, and I think there's a respect level, but I think as racers, we all handle things differently. Like Mike Brown is the nicest guy off the track, but put a helmet on him and he's a complete asshole, you know, and that goes for a lot of guys, including myself. So, you know, I didn't like Jamie Dobb when I was at the GPs. He took me out once and I hated him. And when I say I hated him, if I saw him now, I could sit down and have we could chat each other's ear off all night. But it's different when you're competitors, and I think some people can understand that. Some people are like, how could you hate someone and then be their friend? I'm like, well, when I say hated him, it was purely on a professional level.
Right.
I didn't even really know those guys personally, and vice versa. But you know, we wanted to beat each other. We would intimidate each other. We would take each other out on the track, you know, whatever. So, and everyone rides different. And those guys were some of the, you know, Rhino has always just been just kind of Rhino. He'll smash into you. He'll do whatever. He try to get under my skin. And
the guy's got a competitive edge that's just never going to go away. Did you see him at Loretta Lynn's this week? I mean, he's on a 35-year-old CR250, and he's taking a third. I mean, he's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, he's a special character. I'll give him that. The more I've gotten to know Rhino, the more, and there again, like I said, because we didn't like each other as competitors, doesn't mean I don't respect him. I have a ton of respect for him. I have a ton of respect for Mike Brown. You know, I think Mike Brown has probably swapped paint more than anyone else in my career, because I battled him from 1999 at the GPs almost till the day I was done racing. You know, 2005 even. You know, we swapped paint. So. And he's still out there just unbelievable at age 51. So, there's a rivalry, there's an intensity, but I can honestly tell you there is not one person that I've battled with that I have a problem with.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's great. And I think, after the years go by, I don't want to say a chip on anybody's shoulder, but nobody has a chip on their shoulder anymore. And, you know, you go on with your life. So, hey,
absolutely.
Yeah. In 05, you know, when you sit down with Mitch and he takes out the facts and you then go ride for Mitch Payton, how was the compensation between that and KTM? Because, I mean, you had to be getting some serious money at KTM at that point, and then you're going to go ride for Pro Circuit. Pro Circuit's not KTM. How does that all shake out?
So after, you know, we were talking about 03, Jeremy retires.
Right.
I try to do Supercross, and I get hurt again. And I tell them I hate the bike. They allow me to ride the 125 just for the outdoors in 03. But I'm still, remember I said I had this contract within a contract. So I'm contracted to KTM to ride 250s in 2004.
Okay.
And at this point, I remember Larry Brooks was team manager, and he was trying, because, you know, he was the team manager for Jeremy. Jeremy retired, and KTM ended up firing Ron Heben and hiring Larry Brooks to be team manager at KTM. And in the beginning, I enjoyed working with Larry because I felt like he could see the issues and kind of was on my side as the rider, like, hey, we need to be better as a manufacturer, as a team. And then but then I felt like in 2004 he did some testing and this and that, and they made some subtle changes. But then I felt like the vibe changed. Like, well, there's nothing wrong with the bike now; it's all you. And we didn't quite see eye to eye during that year, and it was miserable. And then they wanted me to ride their 450 on the outdoors, and it vibrated so bad, my right throttle hand would go numb. And I think it was Hangtown. I pulled off while I was in 4th or 5th place, and Larry was pissed. And I remember he was on the phone, and I overheard him. He's like, "Yeah, he's a quitter, blah blah blah." And he was kind of bashing me, and I, sometimes you got to be able to hear that stuff. But on the flip side, I was like, I'm not a quitter. I'm getting labeled as the bad guy, but I'm riding a piece of shit. And that's when I was just like, I'm done.
Right.
I'm out of here. I will not ride for KTM. So they gave me an offer to ride 05 and 06, and some people might remember, but that was when that big rumored contract that Hansen got from KTM, which was a big salary for Supercross only. KTM offered me a good deal with good bonuses, and I ended up on the phone with Kurt Nickel, and I just said, no. I said, Kurt, honestly, I don't want to be here. I don't want to ride for KTM. He's like, is there anything I can do to change your mind? I said, unless you're physically going to be here and get everything done that's on my list, probably not. And he said, I'm so busy, I'm running World of KTM, which is growing leaps and bounds. He's like, not going to happen. And I said, I feel like I'm getting this tension with Larry, and, I feel like they're trying to blame me, and, things need to be better before the finger gets pointed at me. The bike needs to be a lot better before you could say, I'm the one that sucks, or I'm the one quitting. So I just had said, I told him, I said, I'm done. And he said, where are you going? And I said, I don't know. And he said, come on, don't play that game. Where are you going? I said, Kurt, I'm dead serious. I don't have an offer in front of me. I said, but I will not be riding an orange bike. And
you really didn't have an offer.
I swear on my life,
I
had nothing. I ended up having a phone conversation because he called me, but Jeff Fox, who owned Parts Unlimited,
yes,
who was not only a sponsor with Thor and that, but I would say, looking back, genuinely cared about me. And he called me up and he said, Langston, like, what are you doing? I said, I don't know, Jeff. I said, but I just told KTM, like, in a nice way to go shove it. And he goes, what about Peyton? And I said, well, after giving him a cold shoulder a few years back, and then getting into it with Mike Brown and flipping them off and all that, I go, I don't think he would ever answer my phone. And he goes, hold on, stand by. He goes, let me make a call. So I was like, okay, I'll stand by. And then, it wasn't 5 minutes, because I remember I was like, this is quick, and I'm like, it's a 951 number, or I think back then it was 909 actually. So I was like, something just said, answer this call, because I hate answering the phone when I don't know who it is. So I answer it. Hello? GL. Yeah? It's Mitch. What's up, Mitch? He goes, I just got off the phone with Foxy. I said, yeah, and obviously knew what. He goes, you need to get down to my office now. How
far was it? Did you go right then?
His office is in Corona. I was in, I think, Temecula or Murrieta, or wherever I was living. I forget. Yeah, right. Murrieta. But it's about 30 to 40 minutes, depending on traffic. And I said, I will see you in an hour. And he goes, make it sooner. So I jump in the car, and now I'm driving to Corona, and I'm thinking, we didn't really even discuss anything. Like, I just basically got summons, and I'm like, I'm not going to question it. But so what had happened was, and I don't know if Mitch is too pumped on me sharing this, but he had basically an agreement with Brandon Jessamine done. They had sent Kawasaki had sent the contract to Jessamine and was sent back to Mitch's office for his signature to solidify it. Mitch, the reason he summons me up there, said, I'm supposed to sign this right now and ship it, send FedEx it back to Cowie, and it's a done deal. That's it. That's 4-rider team. He goes, but I'm considering, basically he was saying like being one, the biggest asshole in the world for today by not solidifying this contract, but I need to know from you right now, if we're going to make this happen. I was like, oh shit. I'm nervous. I'm like, can I get my dad on the phone? I was like, you feel like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Can I call a friend?
Yeah.
So I got my dad on the phone and we're on speaker. And, I took obviously a pretty good pay cut leaving KTM to go to Pro Circuit, but I believed in my heart that it was the right move. I thought if there's one thing Pro Circuit's known for, that's producing champions and building top-notch equipment, and that's what I wanted. I felt like I was leaving KTM where I felt like I was a little bit held back. Maybe you could say I was arrogant or whatever, but when you feel that as an athlete or as a racer, I think you've got to follow your gut. So I wanted to ride for Mitch. I couldn't get a good 450 offer because, I kind of struggled in 04, and that was at the point in time where there was only really 4 manufacturers, and then KTM was kind of the 5th and the outcast at the time. But getting a 450 ride, any one of those 8 spots, it was tough coming off a year that I had, or a year and a half. So it wasn't like offers were flowing in, but I knew if I would sign for Mitch, I'm like, if I don't win, it's not because of the bike, it's because of me. I'm just not as good as I thought I was. So I knew that I had to go there, test myself, push myself to the limit. But, some people said, oh man, Mitch is tough, Mitch is this, Mitch is that. I'm like, Mitch was a breath of fresh air for me. It was exactly what I needed. And I really feel like, even though I rode from 2 years, when we discussed signing the contract, I remember he said, you're my outdoor guy. What I would love is at least an outdoor title from you. And I'm like, don't worry, Mitch, that's a guarantee. I won back-to-back Supercross titles and got hurt both outdoor series and won the most races. But we had fun. We won a lot. We had some, like anything, some ups and downs. But for the most part, it was probably the 2 most enjoyable years of my career. So like besides my dad, who did everything, I would say Mitch Payton and Harry Evans were the 2 people that were very instrumental in helping my career when I needed that help.
Yeah, and you had a really great 2 years there, no question, no question.
And I remember Mitch said, "I'll turn you." When we did the deal, he said, "We're going to win championships, and you're going to have every 450 team begging for you." And I was like, "That'd be cool," thinking like that would be cool. And then when the time came and I made it clear that I was moving up, I didn't want to be a 250 guy anymore. Like I rode for Mitch because even though it felt like a bit of a step back, it was, that old saying, sometimes you got to take 1 step back to go 2 steps forward.
Yeah. And
that's what I had to do. And then, I had interest from Suzuki, Kawasaki, and Yamaha going into 450s. In fact, even Honda threw their name in the hat briefly, but it was a wonderful feeling to feel like, wow, in 04, I was happy that someone like Mitch goes, I still believe in you, but I can't pay you much, to everyone going, hey, we can offer you this much money, we can offer you that much money. And it was like, holy crap, it's once again crazy how things change and turn. But I just felt like Yamaha was the best option. The problem with Kawasaki was James was their golden boy, and as my agent kind of pointed out, he goes, if you go to Cowie, you are the number 2 guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to a team where straight off the bat, you're not thought or perceived or pushed to be the number 1 guy. You're a backup in a sense. And I'm like, I just remember thinking, I can't do that. There's no way. And at Yamaha, Reed had moved to the L&M Yamaha team that had spun off. So I was going to be the Yamaha factory 450 guy, and that was it. So I like that idea. And so I decided Yamaha was my best option.
Yeah, and it was obviously you won a 450 championship that year. Was it 07?
Yep.
Yeah. So it all worked out, and doing the research, I was wondering. I was surprised you didn't go with Kawasaki, but then you mentioned the James Stewart thing, and I can certainly understand that. So.
And it's nothing personal against James.
No,
don't get me wrong. It could have been Carmichael, could have been Wyndham, could have been anyone, but the fact that
you shouldn't play second fiddle.
The way the conversations were going, it was pretty much like reading between the lines. You're going to be a good backup rider on our team.
Yeah.
A good number 2. And then I was like, yeah, that's just not going to cut it with me. Sorry. And that was the reality. It was nothing against Cowie, nothing against anyone. But, as racers, I think you can ask I'm sure you've had guys that have mentioned on your show,
mm-hmm.
As a racer, I've had the chance to look back a little bit and go, you are selfish. And a part of you has to be successful.
Yes.
If you're worried about everyone's feelings and who might be offended, that's what that's saying, nice guys finish last. So I wanted to go somewhere, and I just felt like the way Yamaha's attitude was, we're not building a great team, blah, blah. You are our guy,
right.
And I it just resonated with me.
Yeah. Grant, you said something was very interesting that I read, and it stated that you felt that a 450 national championship was more gratifying than your 125 world championship. Explain that to me. Is it because it's on American soil? It's the biggest bike.
Well,
what does it mean?
I don't, to challenge you on that, I don't think that was the exact quote.
Okay.
I've been asked, what's your favorite? What's more important? What was the biggest? All these questions, and you get pushed. Now you got to pick one. What I've said is in the past was there's really 2 that really stand out. One was my 125cc World Championship,
mm-hmm.
because it was a dream that we're going to do this. And then it felt like there was no hope in hell of that dream ever being accomplished. And then it happened. And it was only when it happened, it kind of like hit you like, whoa, like we did it. Little kid out of Africa is a world champion. All those things kind of sink in eventually, and you're like, this is so cool. My dad was my guardian, my manager, my trainer, my ass kicker, my everything. And at that point, my uncle became my mechanic, because my dad was genuinely a lot of times talking with people, trying to almost talk on my behalf, because I think, in the early stages, I was so young, I could talk to him, but I couldn't, interpret that to Italians with broken down English, or,
yes.
It was just hard. And I think my dad at times had to almost like be the middleman, the interpreter, this, that. But the 125 world title was monumental. The only reason I said if I had to pick the one as the biggest, being the 450 Outdoor Championship, is, in modern day racing, 450s is the pinnacle class. And I wanted to be in America. And I've also even said at times, we could have this debate back and forth, but I think at least while I was racing, America was the dominant place.
Yeah. Ricky
Carmichael went to the nations and won. America went and won. I came to America and I won. So the 450 title, the 125 title was such an emotional, like, unbelievable thing. Whereas the 450 title felt like after all these years of trials and tribulation, we've made it to the top. Yes, people can say, well, Supercross is the top, but as far as motocross is concerned, I still think the 450 US Championship is the pinnacle.
Yeah.
Look who's in there. Ken Roxon, world champion, came here. Marvin Musquin, world champion, came here. In previous times, myself, Tortelli, Reed, Albert Tate. so many guys chose to come here. Everett's told me to my face, Stefan, I would have moved. I wanted to move to America. I wanted to go there, but he goes, I wasn't good enough in Supercross. And he goes, but here, I'm a hero. I make a fortune, and I'm dominant. He's like, and I'm at that point in my career, like, why go there and struggle through Supercross to hope to do okay outdoors, you know? So everyone looks at things differently. I just feel like were completely different sort of titles that they were like bookends of my career with the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
So they were really special. Everything in between was just part of that kind of the GL story, if it makes sense. But the first and the last to me were just the special, because in 2007 I didn't know that I would get cancer and theoretically never really be able to defend my title, and you know, looking back now, that's why I think it made it that much more special as well.
Grant, after you got the diagnosis with the cancer in your eye, did you stop racing immediately and get treatment? How long was that process?
Yeah, it took a while to diagnose it exactly, because they can't biopsy the inside of your eye and things like that. So they almost monitored it. I saw different specialists. I went to Philadelphia, Miami. I ended up getting my procedure done at the Cleveland Clinic. So it was definitely frustrating. I felt like I was riding the best of my career. Not only did I win the outdoors, I also won what now is Monster Cup, but back then was the US Open.
Yes.
So I beat everyone, you know, Stuart Reed, all these guys that kind of had the edge on me just a little bit in Supercross. But after riding for Pro Circuit, my confidence in the whoops and just overall Supercross riding had just been elevated. I was getting the Yamaha more weight, so I liked it. We were making progress. I was finally healthy and fit. So it was certainly devastating, and it was 08 was a really miserable year for me, truthfully, because it just felt like a lot of questions, not a lot of answers. And then finally had the treatment early 09, and then I think I tried to convince myself I was healthy enough and my vision was good enough to try a race. And I came back in 2010. Yamaha gave me some support, and I had some sponsors that were behind me. But at the end of the day, it was a privateer, and then I just was crashing a lot. And the only thing worse than crashing is not knowing what made you crash, and then realizing there was a hole you didn't see, or a rock, or a shadow. And I obviously came to the conclusion I was trying to convince myself my vision was good enough, but it really wasn't.
Do you have partial vision in the eye that was operated on, or
Yes.
you have partial vision?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's actually, most people have to have their eyeball removed, and the ones that don't, they're usually legally blind after radiation. But I was one of the very few that had some vision. But the doctor told me, he goes, you're probably going to be legally blind in 10 years. And what's funny, it's been 12 years.
Yeah.
And I just started noticing my eye fading. I just went and had a checkup recently to make sure that, you know, the tumor isn't coming back. But my vision has gotten worse. So it comes back to, it's the way I try to explain it is, it's like opening, like my bad eye is like opening your eyes underwater. You can see, but it's blurry.
Yeah.
And my other eye is good. So it creates some issues. I certainly could never race at the highest level, you know, even if physically and mentally I was able to. I wouldn't be able to do it just knowing what I know vision-wise. But when I know where I'm going, what I'm doing, I can still get out and ride and have a good time.
Well, your career had so many doors closed while other ones opened, and it was no different after you decided to retire. Your personality, your speaking voice carried you on to a whole new career as an announcer for NBC Sports and the Whiskey Throttle Show. I enjoy them both. Who were some of your favorite guests on Whiskey Throttle? What are some unforgettable moments there?
You know, the Whiskey Throttle Show was it was kind of something I think maybe Pingree had thought about as well, and I brought it up to him and said, hey, let's do something cool where we go over like the careers with people, you know, and pull out those stories that haven't been told, or, you know, not the typical, hey, how did it feel when you won that race?
Right.
How do you think it felt? It felt freaking amazing. But the downs, the things behind the scenes, all that. So that kind of evolved, but I stepped away from that, just being a little at times overwhelmed, and talking about motorcycles 24/7 can also wear you out at times. I was feeling like it was something I wanted to do, but then he's a firefighter, so his schedule is always different. COVID happened, the dealership was going crazy, busy, and this and that. There was just so many moving parts. I was like, look, I gotta step away, step back. This thing is more of a hobby than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So Ping, I think, does a great job there, and I join him every now and then when they do a live show or whatever now. But yeah, that was something kind of fun. But to answer your question, to be perfectly honest, I was really stoked that we were able to get Marty Smith on.
Yeah.
I knew who Marty was, but the reality is there was no motocross like that on TV in South Africa. So I knew the names, I knew of these guys, but I didn't know them, and I didn't know their stories and all that. So just chatting with guys like him, I got to say Gary Jones, just because when these guests come up, you go and do a little research, and I was like, Gary Jones was the original stud of motocross in America.
Yeah.
And then so you do these things, and you sit down chatting with guys and hearing about them cutting bikes up and all this, and you're like, you feel like a little fanboy going, dude, this is cool stuff. Like, that's crazy. Could you imagine that nowadays? Could you imagine the look on Roger DeCosta's face if he walked up and Cooper Webb's cutting his motorcycle up? I mean, that doesn't happen, So Gary Jones was awesome. Like I said, Marty Smith, bless his heart, was a cool opportunity, because I also think it was one of probably the last real interview he did.
Yeah.
So, a part of me, like Ping mentioned one day, it's like, that's going to be on the internet forever for people to hear. So you must feel kind of honored to have had that opportunity. I was, funny enough, because of the timing, I was a Mike Kidrowski fan, but I never knew Mike Kidrowski until he came to the show. And it's one of those things you're like, I think I know what he's going to be like, and he seemed like a cool guy and a nice guy. But a part of me is like, I really hope he's not an asshole.
Right.
And then he comes, and I'm like, you're just who I thought you were, and so there's been people I watched, didn't know, and then felt like, because you talk off camera, sometimes we go to lunch with the guests afterwards, or, whatever. There's always more that happens than just that interview. So there were some really cool stories, but I think the best ones to me were people that I knew of but didn't know them, because it was like getting a full history lesson on their career. So half the time I kept catching myself so busy listening to the story going, oh, that's cool, and thinking, I don't even have a follow-up question, because I'm so busy listening. So it was, I enjoyed that. I mean, we went through a lot of really, really credible people. So I've listed a few, but don't get me wrong, I really feel like everyone that we had a chance to have on the show, there was a reason that we picked them out.
Yes.
And
yeah. Well, they were all great. And as Ping did say, it's on the internet forever. And we're fortunate that we could be able to go back and listen to this stuff in the future. So, hey, let's talk about vintage racing. I see you mount up on a Mako a couple of times here and there.
Yeah. So funny enough, obviously with my dad being a big enthusiast and a restorer these days himself, and I know we've had a chance to catch up at Mecum Auction and other events, and just honestly after racing, and my dad like, hey, you want to go and check out the auction in Vegas? I was like, oh, let's do it. And then one thing leads to another, and you're interested in this, that, and anyway, Gary, who owns SoCal Mako, My dad got a bike from him, was getting parts and all this. And Gary, somebody was just like, "Hey, man, want to ride one of my bikes? I'd really, be an honor if you would, ride one of them." I'm a Mako guy. I'm like, "Oh, I've never ridden a Mako." And I rode it, and he has this really nicely done up 81 490, and I rode it. I was like, "Damn!" I'm like, I got to be honest.
Pretty
I said,
impressive.
that power band is incredible for its era. I said, I realized real quick, kind of like muscle cars, they all got the horsepower down first, but they couldn't stop for shit or handle. I said, but that Mako is a weapon. It's got great horsepower. It handles decent, but you cannot stop that thing. I was like, there were times, like there was a guy that slid out and fell in front of me, and I'm like, I felt like I was watching an accident happening for like 20 minutes, but it was only like half a second. But
Yeah.
I'm like, you can't stop those things. But it's been fun. I have old injuries in that, so rough tracks just beat me up. But a lot of what we do is more like TT scrambles, flat track, that kind of stuff. But I love sliding a bike. I've always had a passion. Even from a young age, I've been able to ride my dirt bike on a go-kart track with worn-out tires. I've been able to do some flat track on my dirt bike, So I've been able to ride different things for different reasons. And, when you're not getting beat up and you're able just to slide and have fun and be at these sort of – and that's the one thing I think is really cool with vintage racing in general. It really is – a camaraderie thing. It's a bunch of people that have a similar passion. Everyone's diagnosing everyone else's bikes for problems. Everyone's helping everyone out.
Yeah.
Everyone's almost admiring someone else's machine, and it's just a cool vibe of cool people. And I feel like it's something that I'll probably continue to dabble in. I don't want to say I'm going to have a post-racing career. It's never. Racing doesn't do anything for me these days. It makes sense.
No,
Riding and the camaraderie and the socializing and all that is what makes me tick. Like, there's a certain amount of like this nostalgia, or whatever you want to call it, where you go somewhere like, oh, well, you're so and so and you're expected to win. I'm like, dude, I drink almost every day, and I don't train. No, I'm not the favorite. Trust me.
right. But you know what it is?
About muscle memory, I don't have muscle. It's gone.
Yeah, and I want to bring this up as a point on the show. It'll be good for you to know what I'm sort of thinking, and maybe the listeners will grasp this as well. It would be people such as yourself, Grant Langston, or a Chad Reed or a Kevin Windham. We need the recently retired, so to speak, although I know it's longer than recent. It's quite a while. But when that 90s generation, early 2000 generation of riders, when they start to promote or get involved with vintage motocross, that's when it's really, really going to grow. And we need that to survive and to sustain it. Because, I'm 60 years old. I don't want to ride a 1958 BSA. I don't want to ride a bike that old. And for the next generation to help this move along, they're gonna need to get into that late 80s, early 90s bikes, and that's what vintage is. That's what vintage is to a lot of people. Yeah, and we need people like that to kind of promote it a little bit more. You see where Villapoto was riding in Idaho?
Yeah, no, actually, Villapoto is someone that I think a lot of people thought he walked away from the sport, a little bit miserable, and I think some people thought they wouldn't see him around, but he's kind of come back to what makes me tick type thing, and he's into it. He enjoys it.
Yeah.
And I think he's someone too. I don't chat to him very often, but we chat every now and then. But I think he's someone that's going to get more involved in it, and he's got that ambassador deal with Yamaha, so that helps him there, and it also would make him want to be involved. But obviously, he doesn't have to do anything on that vintage side. But it's created this new category. We've got, since COVID, all these kids are out riding. I mean, in my neighborhood, there's kids zipping around all the time, and And I laughed because there's parents getting pissed off their kids are riding up and down the street, and all their front fenders have these big Langston Motorsport stickers on them because of when they bought it. And I'm like, I'll take that as a badge of honor. But you've got this new generation, but then you've got the old generation that's keeping it around. I feel like when I moved to America, just almost 21 years ago, because I moved here at the end of 2000, everyone was wanting to build old Cadillacs and Corvettes and all that, and that became expensive and kind of out of the question. And then I feel like in the last few years, even some of those same people that were car guys are becoming motorcycle guys.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it was street bikes or scramblers or, because of Steve McQueen or maybe even Malcolm Smith, and KTM bringing Husky back, you're seeing this whole old school, new school. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's become part. I mean, I was even at this vintage event, and I remember when Bell said, "Yeah, we're going to bring out the old Moto 3 back, and it's going to be like $450." I was like, "You guys are crazy." I was going to buy an old piece of crap for that kind of money, and I line up, and I'm looking around, I'm like, "Oh wow, they all have Moto 3s, but the new ones."
Yeah.
So it's part of the image, it's part of the nostalgia, it's part of everything. So it's cool. My dad enjoys it. I've been somewhat bitten by the bug a little bit of just appreciating these old motorcycles. And I think it's a combination of getting older, you appreciate older things.
Yes.
Doing the Whiskey Throttle show and interviewing the older legends of our sport. And then going, oh, remember when they talked about pre-production? Remember that bike? Remember? And then you start seeing them. And then you get to ride, and you get drawn in.
Of course. Yeah, because you want to know about the history of it, because you love the sport and you want to know about all the facets of it. So that's what, and
it's cool when someone presents it in front of you. I think, whether you watch whatever it is, like, the Goodwood Festival of Speed in the UK, and you see all these young Formula One drivers getting giddy because they've got to drive Senna's old McLaren or, something even further, Fangio's old Ferrari or whatever. You can see that there's a certain just like coolness factor to that.
Yes.
I mean, there's something cool about these bikes. At that time, that was the leading technology. And what I think is so cool, especially like I would say the 70s, was every year some manufacturers coming out with this new revolutionary technology, and things were just moving and changing so fast. You look at motorcycles now, production motorcycles are fantastic. You don't have to do anything except, adjust the suspension a tad or the sag, but, they're all good. But, you go back then, someone came out, whether it was CZ or whether it was Mako or whether it was Triumph or whether it was Honda, or, all around the world, there were all these people just coming out with revolutionary designs. And, I just think it was a cool part of motorcycling. And, even like my dad said, so in South Africa in the 70s, motocross exploded. Large part was because of On Any Sunday being at the drive-in and the movie theaters, but
yeah.
it was just the coolest thing in the world, and bikes were just changing. And like my dad said, I mean, we would just go to the dealership and just be like frothing over this new motorcycle that we couldn't afford, So I think it was just cool, and I love the history, and I hope it stays around and doesn't die out.
I hope so too. Grant, I got a couple of more questions. We've been chatting for a while now, but there's a couple of things I really want to talk to you about. I've only got a few more things. One is, how long are you married, and do you have any children?
I was married. I'm divorced. I have 2 kids. My daughter just turned 15. My son's about to turn 17. People always ask, "Oh, did you get him into racing?" He was actually diagnosed with autism at a young age, but he's very high functioning. What's funny is only last year during the lockdown, when some of his friends got into riding, he finally wanted to ride. He always had the opportunity, but he basically said, "Yeah, man, I want to ride, and let's go to the track, and can I get a bike?" And he's all into it now. He really enjoys it. So he's got me getting back into the riding routine. So it's kind of fun having a riding buddy and be your son and all that. And my daughter's very into volleyball at the moment. She's on one of the top teams in the country for her age. So she's probably going to go the collegiate route, and hopefully her dream is to be an U.S. Olympian.
Nope. I don't know what happened there. Just hold on 1 second. I'll get back on the phone with Grant Langston. We were just disconnected, and just stand by and I'll do my best to get him back on. We were just talking about his daughter being involved in volleyball and his son being involved in motocross, and hopefully we'll get him back on in a second. And I think we'll have him back here shortly.
Hello.
Grant, are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
All right. So your daughter's into collegiate volleyball. The son is into riding bikes a bit. What's that?
She's in high school. She's in high school right now, but she's hoping to go the collegiate volleyball route. My son got into riding basically kind of because of COVID, and now he's into it. And so we get out and ride, and that's family life. I had a live-in girlfriend for several years, but we split up before Christmas, and I've just been focusing on one, the dealership, and two, just the kids and their sports, and just doing all that. And figured, hey, when the right lady shows up, that'll be the time. But not really pushing that side of it. Grant, you do a lot with some charity work too, don't you? Well, I've always tried to consider myself someone that has struggled as far as just, family that's been dead broke at times, and, literally barely anything to eat. I don't want to say I ever went hungry, but,
right.
Pretty close to that, I would say. And, I consider myself to be pretty fortunate. I've done quite well for myself, and yeah, divorce was expensive and a few other things along the way, but I donate every month to a variety of charities, mainly children, dogs, and people that don't have running water or food. But yeah, I work with Road to Recovery, also other, when you talk charities, our sport, unfortunately, people get hurt all the time, and one of the most frustrating things is hearing people that were trying to be pro but didn't have medical insurance. But then I can relate, because when I was a kid and had a pretty big femur injury, my parents didn't have medical insurance because they couldn't afford it. It was either pay the entry fee to the next race or the monthly medical bill. They chose the entry fee. So I work with Road to Recovery, obviously, because it's very, very direct, and whether it's getting people involved, being involved, donating time, and we, when I say we, because me personally, my family, and the dealership have contributed financially, and we will continue to try and do what we can to help people. And by that, I don't mean send a resume to me that you're going to Raiders next year and expect me to give you all your motorcycles and parts for free, but genuinely helping people that are in desperate times. I am certainly someone that's always going to try and do whatever I can.
Are you at the shop every day? Are you at Langston Motorsports almost every day?
Not every day. Obviously, it changes depending on travel and this and that. And there again, there might be a charity event here. I might be just going riding with my son on this weekday. I'm usually gone during the summer on the weekends because of motocross. So it's always a little here, there, everywhere. But I'm typically there, most part Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of any given week. Because a lot of times we have reps and people, especially lately, things have changed, so whether it was a Zoom meeting or, this or that, you got to be with your sales team, your parts team, your service team, whoever. So there's a lot of moving parts, and I'm having to learn as I go along. There was no manual handed to me or how to be a successful businessman after racing book, but you figure it out. You kind of apply the same rules. Just follow your gut,
do the right things, treat people correctly, do all that. And I'm really proud to say that we literally built a mom and pop shop. And I would say we went into it a little bit blind. Like I said, my dad's a little bit crazy sometimes. I actually said from a kid, from a young age, I rode for a local Yamaha dealership. And I remember like I said, we didn't grow up with much. So my dad used to build my PW50 and PW80 in their workshop because they had all the tools and lubricants and oil. Like I said, my dad kind of couldn't really afford to buy a bottle of oil, so he'd rather use the shop oil, so
Sure.
things like that. So I would be literally hanging out in the dealership, climbing all over the bikes, probably driving the salesman nuts, touching everything with my greasy palms, just that kid. But I remember seeing people get a motorcycle and seeing the excitement, this and that. And there was a little part of me that was like, when I'm done racing one day, I want to have a dealership. And obviously my dad kind of knew that, and we kind of felt a little bit the same way. And we bought a failing dealership after the recession. And there again, I'm trying to figure out if we're crazy or just have enough self-belief. But, not many people buy a failing business and truly believe in their heart they're going to turn around and make it profitable. But we did, and there were times I questioned our decision, but we've been able to turn around, and I've got to be perfectly honest, I'm proud of what I accomplished as a racer, but there's times when I look at the end of the month of the email and, I see that we're Yamaha's #1 dealer in Southern California, which is the biggest market in the world, there's times I just give myself that little fist pump, like,
Yeah,
we did it, it's cool. So the business can be stressful, and dealing with people and employees and all that stuff can be tough and stressful and make you just want to walk away at times. But there's also the other side that I'm like, we've built something pretty cool, and I'm really proud of it. And it's cool that it's me, my mom, my dad, my sister, and a good group of people that we've built around us who I think most of them truly enjoy working for the Langston family.
So Gerald, so Grant would, I've been waiting to say
Don't
this.
call me Gerald.
No,
I'm not that gray
No.
or that chubby yet.
No,
Not yet.
you're not. But I heard you say something on Whiskey Throttle once, and it kind of applies here. So, all in all, after South Africa and the national championships and the world championships and everything else that's been going on in your life, would you say that you have landed with your ass in the butter?
That's actually my dad saying. I don't know where that came from, but he was the one who used it. He's like, he used to say to me, "You're so lucky you landed with your ass in the butter." And it's one of those things. I think if you visualize, you kind of get what that saying is. Yes, I do. I really do. I left during high school. I'm not obviously proud of saying this, but I'm a high school dropout. But I'm also a self-made multimillionaire. So, you can look at that as multiple different ways. I didn't win the lottery. I earned it. As a family, we made sacrifices. We did everything. And then we got to come here and live the actual American dream, which is why I'm proud to be an American and do believe that the American dream is well and alive. And I've seen what's happened in South Africa in the last couple months. I don't know if you're aware of anything, but where I grew up is a war zone. It's depressing. I have friends that call me going, "Is there any way you can help me get out of this country?" And I'm like, "I'm not an immigration officer. Like, I wish I could sponsor you a green card or something." I'm like, but I see them where they're at now, and I'm like, 20 years ago, they were like, "Oh, sorry you're leaving, sorry, good luck." It was more like they were like hoping you would be okay, and now, a lot of those people are just very envious of what I've been able to do. I do have to pinch myself, like sometimes people are like, "Dude, you hang out with this guy, you know that guy, and you rode for them, and you're sponsored by this," and And I'm like, yeah, you forget, when you come from a simple place, I do look like I've lived the rock star lifestyle, but I think at the end of the day, I'm just happy that I live in a great country. I have my family close to me, including my kids. Even though I'm divorced, I get along well with, my ex-wife. I get along very well with my ex-girlfriend that I was with for a long time. That's why I said, even in racing, there's no one I hate. I try not to live hateful. Life's too short for hate. Patch things up, make it good, and just be yourself. Don't try to cave into people. Be yourself. But I really have enjoyed the opportunities that have been presented to me, and I think I don't look at anything that was a failure. I look at it as a learning lesson, and I've been able to learn the way the world works.
Yes.
Not many people can say they've lived on 3 different continents and 4 different countries, and I've lived in Florida, California, so I really have had the opportunity to experience the world, travel. I was counting the other day. I went to 37 countries for racing, and if you throw in Bahamas and 1 or 2 other places for vacation, I've been to 40 different countries.
Wow.
So, and I'm about to turn 40 soon. So I think with that said, everyone says, I want to travel, I want to experience the world, I want to experience life, I really feel like I've been very, very lucky, even when I didn't realize it at the time, but I got to do all of those things.
Yeah, you certainly led a very interesting and blessed life in many ways. You've got your children now, your dad's still with us, and it's just been an honor that I had a moment to speak to you and that you shared so much of your story. And I just want to thank you so much for that, Grant.
Well, thank you, Joe. I mean, I have a lot of respect for you and everything that you've done, and it's just 2 different worlds that get to cross over at times. But yeah, I also like to comment when you said you're by far the youngest guy we've had on on the show. So I thought I took that as a badge of honor. I'm like, I'm not the oldest guy, but I think I've got an older soul, because I did so much at such a young age, and now I'm obviously getting the opportunity to enjoy it. I'm my own boss, and yeah, we'll see what happens in the future.
All right, Grant, thank you for joining me. Give my regards to Gerald, and I'm going to definitely see you guys in October when you have your bike show.
I look forward to it. I know it's become my dad's new favorite day of the year, and I must say I've gotten into it, and it's turning out. It's gotten bigger and bigger every year, and I feel like this year it's going to be big. We've got people contacting us, and we're going to get some other vendors and people involved. And I think it's certainly going to be the best one yet.
I think so.
And with you coming, Joe, we're going next level.
Well, thank you, Grant. And again, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Anytime.
Enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you, Grant.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Oh, what a great interview. My guest has been Grant Langston. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight for that. And I also want to thank my sponsors, Vinco. Keep the ride going with over 650 products in their catalog. Motion Pro for all your specialized tools, cables, and controls. Golan Products. Check out Golan Products. Their fuel filter is just amazing. You might even want to become a distributor for them. Full Circle Racing Limited for vintage and modern rims, spokes, lacing, and truing. Northwest Mako CZ. Thank you, Alan Brown, for all you do for us here in Preston Petty Products. The legend continues. Racer X Magazine, available online on your newsstand now. And Sunrise Vapor Blasting of Modesto. Special thanks to Kevin Bridges and the Dirt Diggers North Motorcycle Club. Don't forget, it's getting close, just about a month away. The Hangtown National will be on September 11th this year. It'll be the last race of the season. So get your tickets for the Hangtown National. I want to thank you all for joining me this afternoon on Vintage Motocross Radio. Don't forget, Vintage Motocross Q&A on Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Hope you all enjoyed the show. Share it if you can. And thanks again for joining me. Have a good evening, everyone.